Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. There is global news after the remarks by the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, this afternoon, looking to, and this is a technical term, I'm sure you will enjoy it, taper the QE buying of these last many months, $85 billion a month, taper to extract the Federal Reserve from the low interest, zero interest policy of these last years of the recovery from the recession. The markets, of course, immediately dip, but after all, they're skittish. They're a bit like racehorses. What we're watching is the rest of the planet responding to Chairman Bernanke's remarks. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com joins me tonight because watch this. This is a shin bone, knee bone, collarbone, brain. Everything is connected, and nothing is independent of any other part of the global economy. Gordon, a very good evening to you.
Good evening, John.
Mr. Bernanke makes remarks about a taper in the Federal Reserve policy in the United States. He is our central banker, and Europe is in a recession. However, we're going to look at Asia tonight, and China is the engine of Asia these last 20 years, the miracle, the growth engine. You have completely well documented these last months and this last year the declines that have been masked in the Chinese economy. But there is no masking Mr. Bernanke extracting the U.S. from this low interest rate and an enormous buildup on the Federal Reserve books of cash, $2 trillion and plus, climbing all the time. That money is going to come out. Alan Meltzer, the memory of the Hoover Institution, the memory of the Federal Reserve history system over the last 100 years, told me within these last hours that $2 trillion comes out, and that's where inflation's coming. It's coming from there. However, I want to point to China. China these last weeks has been struggling. The central bank there is not an honest broker, but it is the China Bank. How does Mr. Bernanke's decision to taper, to stop the $85 billion a month, maybe back to 65, headed to zero, perhaps eventually tightening at some point in the immediate future, or his successor to tighten, how does that affect the banks in China?
It doesn't affect them very well, John, because people are taking money out of emerging economies, including China, and they're taking it back across the Pacific. So essentially, money is going to get very, very tight in China for a number of reasons, but one of them is because of Bernanke. And we saw this in May when Bernanke had his first comments about tapering. You saw the effect in Asia was almost immediate.
Because the Chinese depend on cheap money, the way we have these last months. But their cheap money is to the excess. We have a headline tonight that the Chinese central bank has not put money back into the system on Tuesday as it normally does, or on Thursday as it normally does. Remember, it's Thursday morning now in China. Why, Gordon? Are they worried about inflation there?
They're worried about a number of things, but one of them is because, they had this enormous boom since 2008 because of massive fiscal stimulus. And right now, people are making some very bad decisions because money is much too cheap. Debt is now spiraling out of control. And so the central bank there has got to tighten.
Because the banking systems are all connected, we know that this connects to the stability of the regime, of the administration right now. Xi Jinping is the new boss, but the Central Committee remains in control. They're aware that the economy is struggling. They're aware that the banking issues can't be solved immediately by printing more money. How does that show itself in the policies of the Chinese state?
Well, they're starting to fall back on nationalism because they can no longer rely on prosperity as a basis of legitimacy. And so this is sort of manifesting itself in a much more aggressive, hostile, and belligerent foreign policy. And that, of course, affects China's neighbors, and it also affects the United States.
We go immediately to China's neighbors. This one, North Korea, we know is a rogue and failed state, a predatory state, an arms dealer, drug dealer, counterfeiter, all kinds of gang behavior. Bruce Bechtol joins us. Bruce is the author most recently of The Last Days of Kim Jong-il, the father. This is North Korea in a changing era. There is a new boss there, the third son, Kim Jong-un. Bruce, a very good evening to you. A few days ago, North Korea talks suddenly of peace negotiations, perhaps with the United States, perhaps with the Gang of Six. However, this is a sudden reversal from the provocations, from the threats, from the suggestion of nuclear war. What is the motive behind North Korea changing? We understand China's in trouble. Is North Korea in trouble? A very good evening to you, Bruce.
Good evening, sir, and good evening to you, Gordon. I think that this is just part of the normal script that Kim Jong-un is following, a script written for him before his father passed away, as I talk about in my most recent book. And that script is the same one his father followed, essentially, and it's, engage in this robust brinkmanship and totally irate rogue remarks, coming out of their propaganda outlets. That's phase one. Phase two is the peace offensive, and then which we're in right now, and then phase three is a violent provocation, something that actually inflicts casualties on the South Koreans or possibly even Americans. And we saw this play out last time in 2009, 2010, and they're following almost the same script right now. So I think that's something we need to be careful of, and it appears that, at least for now, both the administration of Park Geun-hye in South Korea and the Obama administration are, in fact, being very careful, especially because North Korea has said, at least in some of their statements, that the nukes are off the table. So really, what's the point in going to talks if the main issue is off the table?
Bruce, it's very interesting in that North Korea proposed talks with South Korea and then canceled them on the day before they were about to begin. That was a week ago. Now they propose talks with the U.S. I mean, how could anyone take them seriously after refusing to talk to South Korea? Now they want to talk with us.
Exactly. And basically the talks broke down last week because of where the microphones are going to be placed at the table. I mean, and it's happened before. Again, this is the same old script we've seen numerous times. It's important for guys like you and me and John to judge past precedent and understand that Kim Jong-un is going to play the exact same kind of script that his father did in his foreign policy and his regional policy. And he is, and that's something we can expect, I think, as you know. But I do think that it's very important to note that they did say that the nukes are not on the table. And if the nuclear weapons or their nuclear weapons development is not on the table, then talks really aren't going to get us anywhere.
Something that is on the table, Bruce, and I know this from your reporting for a long time, is that North Korea is an arms dealer, and it exports proliferation, that is missile proliferation, and any kind of predation you want to buy. The Israelis attacked in eastern Syria in 2007 to destroy a nuclear facility that was under construction by the North Koreans. What can you tell us about the North Koreans in Syria now? Now that the Obama administration has changed its policy and intends to arm the Syrian resistance?
Well, interesting stuff, John, and that's a great question. It should come as no surprise that Syria is heavily engaged in supplying the Syrian military. What's a big surprise to me is that almost nobody in the press has been talking about this, and it's been going on. It's been going on since the 90s, but it obviously picked up during the Syrian civil war. And please allow me to be specific, if I may. The North Koreans, we now have reports, are resupplying the Syrians with missiles because they've been firing Scud missiles, so they need more missiles. They're helping them to maintain their Scud missiles. They've also been supplying them with chemical weapons and resupplying them with chemical weapons. They've also increased their logistical efforts to help the Syrians with all kinds of things like their tanks, trucks, artillery, because most people, as you know, are just not read in with how extensive North Korean proliferation of all kinds of military arms has been to Syria since really about 1991. And we're just seeing, that play out as the Syrians fight a war. They use a lot of these materials, and they need to get more of them. They need to get resupplied, and that's exactly what the North Koreans are doing. And because of that, the North Koreans are obviously making quite a tidy profit off of this.
Bruce, just a really quick question. How are the North Koreans getting these missiles to the Syrians? I mean, are they flying over China? Are they going over water? Why are we letting this happen?
Less than 30 seconds, Bruce.
I would say the majority of those missiles are probably coming via maritime means, and they're probably going into the port of Tartus, but some are probably also flying over China. So it's probably both, but the majority of that is probably via maritime means.
That would be inconsistent with some of the promises made by Xi Jinping recently, Gordon, or with regard to North Korea and Kim containing the rogue state.
Absolutely, John.
Bruce Bechtol, Last Days of Kim Jong-il, the North Korean Threat in a Changing Era. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.